Hey everyone, it's Heather Darnall. Welcome back to my art and ministry channel. Thank you for joining me for another video. Today's painting is something I'd like to try for myself, given I saw it originally on Pinterest when I go there from time to time to just, peruse for some ideas, or just I'm bored. You know what I mean? Just laying in bed, trying to go to sleep, making myself bored, scrolling and scrolling. I mean, hopefully I'm not the only one who does that. But anyways, I came across this piece by Asid Rasheef, and immediately when I saw it, it made me think of creation in the beginning. So I want to make this painting reflect creation rather than the way that he made his painting come across being more of a difference of night and day and or summer or winter type thing. So again, this is going to be more of a biblical scripture type piece. And so therefore I want to make this a worship video. So I'm not going to provide any kind of steps of instruction or direction or anything that I'm doing in the midst of it, just because I really want the same vibe of creation to be felt as I'm creating this piece. The music to accompany it is, I couldn't find a song that could be more fitting than this one, which the lyrics are literally about creation combined with our salvation, so that hopefully this piece will just hammer home the significance and the blessing and the beauty of creation. So I really just couldn't, like I said, be more excited to do this video with you in hopes that you'll worship alongside with me. But before we get started, today's ministry snack, of course, is going to reflect this piece coming from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 1 through 25. And it reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was an evening and there was morning, the first day. And God said, 'Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, 'Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear.' And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, 'Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth.' And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, 'Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth.' And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, 'Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens.' So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth.' And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, 'Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds.' And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good." So the book of Genesis is believed to have been written by the prophet Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament, also known as the Torah and or the Pentateuch. But before we dive into the word, as always, I just want to let you guys know that my messages given to you are given with the best of my current knowledge and understanding regarding the subject and matter. Now, unfortunately, people love to rip the book of Genesis apart because a lot of information and or answers are left out. And while there are a lot of answers left out in so many areas, God intentionally left them out for a reason. They have no significance, therefore, they are not important. We are not to focus on them, just like Adam and Eve were not to focus on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that was placed in the center of the Garden of Eden. But the enemy got them to focus on it anyway, just like he's getting all the unbelievers to focus on all the unknowns. Not just in the book of Genesis, but the Bible as a whole, ultimately leaving those people with having no faith. Other details, on the other hand, that are written have more meaning, hence their importance and why they are included in the word and others are not. So if God is silent about something, then we are to be silent about it too. Now, we can have or put in all the speculation that we want, but that's the thing. We are to leave it at speculation only and not let it interfere with what is written. Now, you may recall in my last message that I had mentioned Jesus speaking to the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verses 18 through 19. He says, "For I testify to anyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to these things, God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life, from the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book." That said, don't take anything away and certainly don't put anything in either. Simple as that. This is not our book. Okay, finally onto creation here. But since I brought to the table that there are a lot of gaps and unknowns, let it be known that I do not have all the answers. I have speculation in addition to the things that we do know or the things that are written, which God made into his holy word. Now, real quick, and unfortunately, many people, due to their lack of believing in God, are going to continuously search for answers. They'll waste their whole gifted life trying to find things that simply have no answers for humans to obtain and or even comprehend. So we could take God out of the picture all we want, basically being atheists. But somehow, no matter what we put in the place of God, as far as, in the beginning goes, being like space, time, matter, even distance, we're going to always be asking ourselves, well, what came before that? So do you see, by eliminating God being our creator, we are ultimately foundationless. We have no basis for anything, because only a creator can create something out of nothing. So we can look into it all we want, or we can just simply trust what God wanted to be written or not written, and leave it at that, knowing that what he says and does is for a good reason. So for the passage breakdown and our remix, starting verses 1 through 2, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Well, no one knows when in the beginning was. All we know is that is the time when God began his process of creation, that being the universe, God's angelic hosts, all that's in the universe, mankind, and later on, not in this message, but it's also unfortunately the beginning of sin and death. At the same time, this does not imply that that's when God himself was created. Remember, he is the creator, not a creation. So he has no beginning and he has no end. He is timeless and self-existing. We may know what timeless and self-existing means by definition. However, we personally have zero experience on actually being timeless and self-existing because we are neither of those. Therefore, again, let me reiterate, we are just a result by our creator because we are a creation. You may have heard this in scripture before because it sounds weird and contradicting, but it's something that Jesus said also in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 13. He says, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." Jesus doesn't mean he had a starting point, nor does it mean he ends at a certain point to come. He's literally just expressing the fact that he is the beginning of creation and the one who puts an end to all this mess. Now, what I do know is the heavens and the earth are two separate spaces, both created for different reasons. Although to my understanding, when God created the earth, he wanted it to be like a heaven on earth experience type thing, since there was no corruption and or sin on earth to change all that, So both were made to perfection, reflecting God's perfect existence. This was also a time and place, being the earth, in which God walked in his full glory and presence alongside his creation, everything made to be perfect and everlasting. But as we all know, or should know, until his best creation, being mankind, chose sin over him, the earth and all of its inhabitants changed as we know it to be what it is today, definitely not being perfect. So next in verses 2 and 3, it says, "The earth was without form and the darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." Now this is one of those areas with a lot of unknowns, However, some keywords that pop out to me are without form, darkness, and deep. Now, I'm borrowing language from a well-known pastor that I enjoy listening to, Chuck Smith, who has unfortunately and sadly passed on. But I love what he says in regards to this verse, as it's inconsistent with the nature of God to create something without form and void, to create something wasted and desolate. After hearing that, I couldn't agree more, because God doesn't create wasted things or desolated things. He doesn't make junk, and he certainly has no part of darkness. So right there, to me, is an obvious gap, rather of time and definitely information, between verses 1 and 2, because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then immediately it says, and the earth was without form. That almost sounds backwards. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to point out every missing link or gap, that we come across. Rather, instead, I'm just going to point out what I find interesting. And one of those things I find interesting here is, as far as darkness goes, one has to wonder, when God created his host of angels, another unknown of when, which includes Lucifer, now known as Satan. Satan, as we all know, or should know, he was cast down after iniquity was found in him, along with a third of the other angels, being his followers, were cast down with him. Satan is a part of darkness, and so there's a suggestion, again, just my speculation, but when God created the earth, next is perhaps when Satan and his crew fell, i.e. being cast down, having fell onto the face of the deep, being the earth, as God's judgment and wrath, for it to then become dark. Therefore, to me, it seems plausible that God would then turn darkness into light, because he is the light, as God's spirit was hovering over the face of the deep. I say all that because that puts Satan in place, already being on the earth when he tempted Adam and Eve. God let him stick around, and I know so many people are asking the big question, why? Why did God, being omniscient or all-knowing, create Lucifer to begin with, if he knew he was going to turn God's perfect world into a sewer and a junkyard, figuratively speaking, but basically turn the world into, as we know it today, having all this crime, confusion, chaos, and calamity? That, my brothers and sisters, is a legit question. However, that would steer me right off this message, and is going to be something to get into the weeds about at another time, because I really do believe there is an answer to that. But anyway, back to my pondering of Satan sticking around. So I imagine God let him remain, and just build up his beauty and presence in the midst of Satan's darkness anyway, because that is what lines up with God's nature. He turns darkness into light, he turns ashes into beauty, and he turns bad things into good things, just to put it plainly. Although, as I've said, that's just my personal guess, as it will never be known, nor will the time gap ever be explained. Again, all these details are left out for a good reason. They don't matter. And so the bottom line is, all that we should be caring about, or have or be in awe over, is the very fact that God created something magnificent and spectacular out of nothing. Okay, finally moving on to verses 3 to 5, it says, "And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day." So let this scenario sink in with you. All God did was use his divine words and literally just spoke the world and all that's in it and around it in existence, And as you can see, he saw it was good. Remember, he only makes good things. As far as darkness is concerned, I believe that our darkness, being our nighttime, was planned. So if God planned it, it must be good. Therefore, it cannot be the same darkness in which the enemy lurks around in, because the enemy is linked to the darkness of death. Now, at this point, I don't believe that the light God initially speaks of when he says, let there be light, is the light of the sun. Rather, I believe it is the light of his presence, because remember, I said he is the light, and he doesn't speak the physical lights as we know of, being the sun, moon, and stars, into existence until shortly after. Alrighty, so next on to verses 6 through 10. Now let me forewarn you, these verses sound rather wordy and repetitive, making it very confusing, or can be very confusing. So just be very attentive to what he finally puts on the table to make it all make sense. So he says, "And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So clearly God is on a roll here, just speaking more heavenly things into existence, and I say heavenly because he literally splits the waters so that they'll both be in heaven and on earth. Remember earlier I mentioned how God made the earth to match a heavenly experience, or at least that's my belief, that he intended for both places that he created to be very much similar, just in separate spaces. But the same kind of awe and beauty that he created in the heavens, he duplicated or wanted to make on the earth. So here's something that I find interesting and fascinating at the same time. So as long as the earth has been around, even with all the changes in it, do you not find it fascinating that the seas have always been the seas and the lands have always been the lands? Now, the lands may have certainly shifted and or drifted, but the oceans have not dried up. Do you not find it fascinating that no matter how roaring the seas are, they have not overcome the lands? That is by God's doing. There are many references in the Bible where he speaks how he places those barriers. And it's the fact that he places barriers at all. But my personal favorite reference in this regard comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 5, verse 22. As it says, for I have placed the sand as a boundary for the sea, an eternal decree, so it cannot cross over it. Though the waves toss, yet they cannot prevail. Though they roar, yet they cannot cross over it. Now, you can't compare a tsunami to what God commands, you know what I mean? And besides even the weather and the results of the weather, God is still in control of. But do you not see how fascinating that is? Okay, so now on to verses 11 through 13. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was the evening and there was the morning, the third day. Okay, this is something else that I find extremely interesting, and I really hope that you'll consider this fact too, because it's something that I don't think really anybody, if any, very few people will take this into consideration. But given that God just sprouted all kinds of vegetation, trees that already have fruit bearing on them, just, ready to pick and devour, goes to show us that he put things on the earth that have predated factors. Think about it. He didn't say he planted all these seeds that he came up with and then waited for them to, all mature at their own pace. No, he literally spoke them into existence, all being mature, lush, and beautiful. And it was so. That said, so many scientists say that the world is billions of years old, with a B. Is it really now? Well, when Adam was born, was he an infant? No. He already had teeth. He was a full-grown man. He didn't need to learn to walk, talk, eat, run, work, whatever it is. Jesus, on the other hand, he was born as an infant and he had to learn how to do all that stuff. So look at the advantage that Adam had over Jesus. As a matter of fact, shortly after he was made from the dust, Eve was brought to him, and then soon after they had intercourse and started a family. So right there is more predated examples, so to me, doesn't always necessarily mean that the scientists are always right. I also believe that God placed rocks and other earthly exhibits, that show and or have significant age to them to give the earth a nice balance, Therefore, this is just me, is again why I don't always follow and or swallow with what all of the scientists say. Remember, nature and science follow what God says and does, not the other way around. Something else that Pastor Chuck Smith brought to his listeners' attention at the time was quite interesting and comical at the same time, which is why I want to share it with you too. But he said, when he was in school, scientists at the time believed the world to be about 2 billion years old. Yet not much later, they changed their mind and said, oh, actually, the world is about 10 billion years old. And so that said, I'm just not sure how they can squeeze 8 billion years in just a few decades of life from this man when he was a schoolboy to now having a full-time job. I mean, he's not that old. So do you see now how scientists are always chasing answers? They're always changing their minds. It's because they have no proof on things of this matter. They only have what you and I have, which is speculation. And it's unfortunate that they'll take their speculation, and insist it to be concrete evidence, therefore misleading so many people. All right, I don't want to open up a can of worms. So let's just move on to verses 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So remember when I mentioned that God said, "Let there be light," and I believe that to be the light of his presence, because here is when it appears that he is speaking of the actual sun, moon, and stars as we know them to be the various fixed lights in the sky to rule over the day and night. Again, isn't that fascinating? These lights, they're still going. They have not moved and they have not faded. Only an all-powerful God can do something like that by also creating gravity and or a perfect orbiting system to ensure their placement and or any controlled movements. Now, it is suggested that heaven currently has no night because since God resides there, and him being the light, therefore there would be no night. That's just a little before the given scripture I had mentioned. So also in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verses 22 through 25, also describes and confirms that there is no need for the sun, moon, and stars in heaven because, again, God is the light, and the Lamb, being Jesus, is the lamp, aka the light. And it reads, "And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there." All right, finally closing off our passage today with verses 20 through 25. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Now let's consider some more fascinating things here. So God brought forth all kinds of vegetation that we can barely keep up with, each according to their kinds. And he did the same with the waters, the skies, and the land. Talk about a wonderful designer he is. Just look at all the variation of life that he created, and none of them are identical. They're just each according to their own kind. Look at humans. There is not a single human being identical to the next human being, not even identical twins. That really just means they only have near identical traits, because they still have different DNA, they have different personalities, and they even have some different physical traits. What I mean is one twin can have 3 freckles on their nose and the other one doesn't have any, or one twin can be a half inch shorter or taller than the other one, therefore classifies them as being different. But moreover, their physical traits making them different, it's their DNA that makes them different. Just like God creates different DNA in every living creature that he has brought upon this earth. All that said, how can one not believe in an all-powerful, all-creative creator like that? Clearly, he likes variation and has the capacity to create vegetation and creatures to live in any kind of climate and environment. No human being can begin to keep up with what God has brought forth. And of course, just as God said, he saw what he made, and it was good. What I find sad is how people can look at a building and know that it was created by a creator. So what I mean is they know it started, that building started in the mind of somebody who then put what they envisioned onto blueprints, who then gathered up a team of people and equipment, all the way to a finished product of an erected building. People look at art and know that it was created by a creator. We know that what that finished outcome is it came from somebody who had a vision in their mind, who went out and gathered all the paints and supplies, who then carried out their vision to be on whatever surface they had transferred it to then look at this beautiful masterpiece. On the other hand, God gives us so many life forms that we can't even keep up with, as more than enough evidence as our creator. Yet so many people doubt his capabilities and moreover, his existence. Again, this is just more evidence of a fantastic, all-powerful creator. Given the fact that God made the human race and he made us to all know the difference between right and wrong. He imprinted his law in our heart. Therefore, that is why we all know the difference between right and wrong. We may know different languages and not speak the same languages. We might have completely different cultures, but how is it that we know, hey, stealing is not good. Hey, killing is not good. Hey, cheating is not good. How do we all know and share the differences in emotions? How do we all know that we have to eat just to survive? How do we all have the same bodily functions and pains when things aren't going right within? How is that just a coincidence? It's not. Yet sadly, again, many people would just rather spend their time and energy believing that we are from a random, mysterious clump of bacteria, and then we're supposed to trust the minds and the rules of some evolved microscopic whatever, and put all of our faith and trust in this creation that's accidental. And this is all coming from people who call themselves scientists, demanding that we believe the evidence in their findings. Well, here's what I have to say about that. So I'm pretty sure most of us have heard the expression, show me the money. Well, how about show me the evidence or the proof in your bacterial findings? Because there is none and they know it. By the way, I'm not hammering or knocking all scientists, because not all scientists are normal. Something else I wanted to mention is how, unfortunately, many people argue over this particular section because God mentions his days in the various forms of life that he created. To us, a day is 24 hours. And as we all know, that is just simply, that's not a lot of time at all. At least it's not for me, Therefore, bringing the unbelievers to the conclusion that this just can't be possible to create all that he's supposedly done in under a week, given the fact that he rested on the seventh day, being the Sabbath. Now, I know I skipped over God's best creation, being mankind, which is us, but that really is a message for another time, given the complexity of mankind, mankind's duties, and let's not forget the fact that this is also the beginning of, like I said earlier, of sin and death. But real quick, backpedaling to the Sabbath, when I said God rested, is another time and area in the Bible where many people misunderstand or take out of context to believe, that somehow because he rested, he got tired, he exhausted himself. God expends no energy. He doesn't get tired. All that simply means is that he finished what he started. There was nothing else left to create. And after he saw what he made, it was good. But back to the days of the week in which God had created everything, specifically in the first, second, and third days, and so on. Unfortunately, it has so many people, really the unbelievers, in an uproar because all of these things don't line up with what scientists brings forth. The fact of the matter is, it's very likely these same scientists are overlooking the evidence that God put forth in his word, such as these predated factors, like the fruit trees that already have fruit hanging off it, the fact that there was a man born to this world that was not an infant, rocks, dirt, all that kind of stuff. But something for us to be mindful of is that, like I said, we don't know what he considers as a day. All we know is he gave us something to keep track of, earthly time, but he doesn't use time. Remember, he is heavenly and he is timeless. So one day could be 1,000 years, just like 1,000 years can be a day. We just don't know. All we know is that he gave us a notation of his timing, whatever that may be. The bottom line is we need to not get caught up in these details that do not matter. Who cares? Why would we waste our time trying to find an answer that we'll never find out and miss out on all these heavenly opportunities that he provides for us on earth? You know what I mean? So we need to take ourselves out of the picture with our know-it-all mind, you know what I mean? Because we are not the creator. We are not the original author of this book. I guess I just can't reiterate the fact that how unfortunate it is that so often we do the opposite, that we take it upon ourselves to determine what he means and that we get it all wrong. You know what I mean? Just like the scribes and the Pharisees did. They took God's holy and divine words and made it into their own dish. Let that be a lesson for us to not do the same, rather for us to enjoy the Word of God, soak in the beauty that He created for us, and for us to feel His presence within His creation, so that we are able to draw closer to Him, the way He intended for His creation to be, in a relationship, not a competition. All right, guys, let's get started.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signifier of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Ooh, and as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, the canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I. So will I. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sun chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear, yeah. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart in a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one